Welcome back to another episode of A Human Experience. I'm Dr. Margie Serrato. If you're new here, thank you for being here. If you're not new here, thank you for being here too. I'm celebrating 14 years anniversary with my husband. So this episode is going to be about relationships. It's going to be about my marriage. It's going to be about my marriages because I'm on my second one. And it's really going to be about what have I learned, so that you can think about what can you learn. As always, the starting point is the storytelling. It is about something that I've had insight about, or something that I've had life experience with, or something that I have learned that I will share with you. Relationships govern our lives, whether that's relationships with our family, relationships with our kids, relationships with peers, relationships with authority, relationships with ourselves, relationships with loving partners. And we have learned so much nonsense about how relationships work, how they don't work, how to fix them, how to fix people in relationships. And a lot of what we learn, not surprisingly, is through the media, is through movies, is through the romantic comedies, is through romance novels, it's through the Cosmo magazine, it's through whatever, always outside of ourselves. And also it's unconsciously what we see in the examples of relationships that we have around us. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My first marriage lasted for 7 years. And my first marriage, I could go into that in great detail, and I will at some point. But let's just say that I didn't know what I was looking for out of marriage. I knew, like many of us, that I wanted to be married to somebody whom I loved, somebody who loved me back, somebody who I could see myself aging with. And I'm using that word very specifically. Someone who I could see myself doing a lot of the activities that mattered to me. And that's pretty much it, really. We do not learn the deeper meanings, the deeper value of what marriage or a loving relationship can bring. And I'm separating a little bit the marriage because there's so many cultural rules, so many social constructs around what marriage is. And what do I mean by social construct? It means the guidelines, the structure, the building of what we understand relationships are supposed to look like, marriage is supposed to look like, is pretty narrowly defined. It is very narrowly defined, for example, that it is between two people. Now, I'm not talking about polygamy, but that is part of it. I am also talking about how, really, from that standpoint of just thinking that it's between two people, this rule, this what we feel like is a fixed rule about what marriage is supposed to look like between two people. And really, if we extend that to what the majority of people believe, between a man and a woman. Okay. So very rigid, very limited ideas about what a lifelong partnership, alliance with another person is supposed to look like. It is an alliance, but we don't see it that way. We see it from a very, I'm going to say, glamorized or glorified idea of romanticism that fails us tremendously, because marriage and relationships are much more than that. But we just learn to kind of look at it from the surface. We have all these dating shows, we have all of these different ways in which we learn about what a marriage should look like or what a dating relationship should look like. But in truth, none of us have been taught the essential component about relationships, about marriage, which is, what does marriage look like to you? To understand at a very granular level, what is your example of marriage? What are the examples that you have seen about marriage? What are the concepts, the ideas, the vision that you understand marriage to be? So that was basically not at all what I had going on in my first marriage. It was a loving relationship, but there were a lot of things that fell apart because I had not thought about a lot of other things that matter within the scope of a marital relationship. So we're going to speed up past that first one. Lots of learning there, lots of things to share for another episode. But since I'm kind of celebrating my 14th wedding anniversary with my current husband, I want to focus on that. I want to focus on the learning that I have had with him. So there are a few things. I had the learning from the first relationship, from the first marriage, to be able to say what I don't want in the next one. And I'm going to just go ahead and say that I manifested my current husband. His name is Erik. Because when I came out of the other relationship, in fact, when I already knew that it had ended, that was before the divorce, but when I knew that our relationship had ended, I had just gone on this trip to South Korea. I was there for the summer of 2007. I was part of a National Science Foundation Research Abroad program, and this is where I met Erik. And within 2 weeks of being in Korea, before the program even started, I just had some time to myself, time away from the day-to-day, time away from school, time away from the stressors of my relationship, to really think for myself, to really feel, what am I feeling right now? And the feeling of freedom that I felt being on my own felt like a very clear signal that that's what felt good and that's where I needed to be. But I was also thinking, okay, I don't want more of this kind of relationship in the future. So what do I need to do? What is it? What is the kind of partner that I want? And I thought very intuitively about what are the things that I need in a person. I need somebody to be reliable. I need somebody to be level-headed. I need somebody who's not going to go back on our agreements. I need somebody who's not going to go back on their goals. I need somebody who is dependable for me, who is dependable in our relationship. And I need somebody who is going to understand that my goals are non-negotiable, that the goals that I have set for myself are important enough for me to want to continue pursuing them all the way to the end. And come hell or high water, I was not going to compromise on those goals. So I had clarity around what were some of the characteristics that that person needed to have. Now, Erik is exactly that. He's dependable. He is reliable. He's loyal. He is an amazing person in so many different ways. But that's what I was focusing on in the moment. And I didn't expect to meet him. I didn't expect to meet anybody at that time who fit the bill. I wasn't even thinking about being with anybody. But I don't know, divine timing. I just kind of surrendered to, well, this feels right. This feels intuitive. This isn't limericcy. So it's not the, that first stage when you're like, oh, you have like all these happy feelings and butterflies for a person. This felt like a lot more than that. And I trusted that. And I'm glad that I did because, hey, 14 years of marriage says a lot, right? And 17 years of getting to know this person and being with this person. All of that matters. It's important. One of the things that immediately comes up right now as I'm sharing this is a lot of times we have this very unfortunate idea that the person that we're with, that we can change them. That there's parts of them that we don't really like, but that's okay, I can change them. Especially for women, this trope, this story, this narrative that we learn that if he loves me, he will change for me. Please let that go. If you love the person, you love them and accept them exactly as they are. They don't have to change for you. If there's something so egregious that you feel they need to change for you, you need to look elsewhere, because it is not that person's responsibility to change for you. That person is responsible for changing for themselves, not because they're pressured, not because you think it's right, not because that's what you desire out of the person. So we have a lot of things to dissect here, but that's one of them. Going into a relationship or going into a marriage with the intention, with the idea that you are going to make that person change should be a stop right there. Now, here's another thing. We have no idea at a deeper level, most of the time, who we're marrying. And I say that because my husband and I were at this point of getting divorced in 2020. And, basically during the pandemic, during COVID, we should have celebrated our 10th anniversary and we didn't. And we didn't celebrate our anniversary because we didn't feel like there was anything to celebrate in our marriage. We were at a point in our relationship where there were a lot of life things that happened to us that we hadn't learned how they were happening for us, particularly for me. And that created a lot of stress in our relationship. It created a lot of financial stress because it came with losing a job, not because I asked for losing my job, but because that's simply what happened. Nevertheless, the effect was the same. It created financial stress on top of other stressors where he felt like I was the unreliable partner. Now, here's the thing that shifted things a lot for me. That experience, which came with a huge mental health challenge, a huge mental health crisis for me, that included severe depression, suicidal ideation, severe anxiety, panic attacks, the works, okay, put me in this space where I had to reckon with guilt around how I didn't know how to support my ex-husband when he was experiencing the same. And that was hard. It was icky, I'm not going to lie, because I had to think about what he was suffering through. And I had to understand and acknowledge that I did not know how to support him through that. So with that empathy and with that perspective, I was able to look at what Erik was going through, and trust me, it didn't make me feel better. But it gave me a sense of, this is what that feels like to be on the other side of this dynamic. And man, that sucks. But all I could do at that moment was think about, well, what do I need? I need to make myself better. I need to get better. And that needs to be my focus. And the marriage, while super important, especially after you have kids, there's a lot of layers here. It made me realize I still have to be better. I have to heal. I have to be okay for myself before I can even think about this other area of my life, which is so important. But ultimately, right now, it needs to take a backseat because I can't handle all of it at once. It is just not possible for me to do. I don't have the energy. I don't have the bandwidth. Now, think of the stressors in your life. Think about the relationships in your life. Think about your partnerships. Think about your marriages. Think about the marriages of people that you know. And sit with the fact that stress completely disrupts your thinking. But trust that if a person is under such duress, it's not that you don't matter. It's not that the relationship doesn't matter. It's that they only currently have the capacity to work on themselves and to work on trying to better themselves and work on understanding what the hell is happening to them. The gift of going through a mental health crisis, I know it seems strange to put it that way, but as I was healing myself, I was also starting to think about a lot of things, like I mentioned in the last episode. One of those things was, what is self-love to me? Do I feel like I love myself? What do I need to do to give myself the love that I deserve and that I desire? And as I was going through all of this, I thought, if this person cannot love me the way that I need to be loved, maybe this person doesn't need to be in my life. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes we misinterpret other people's actions or inactions completely. And that's kind of what was happening with us. As it happened with a lot of people during 2020, where they had a really good, hard pause to their life, which made them realize, what am I doing with my life? Or what am I doing with this person? Or what am I doing at this job? Or all of them at once. We were in that place where we were going through those questions for ourselves, but also with each other. We had several conversations around divorce. And then we thought, okay, well, we've been together for this long. We have 2 kids. What is the best course of action? Let's try marriage counseling. And as it happens, to a lot of people, marriage counseling, couples therapy can often exacerbate stuff tremendously. I can't say that I think it has a very high success rate. And there are a lot of dynamics why that is and why I understand it having gone through it. But long story short, part of that is that because marriage counseling did not work well for us, we ultimately started having the conversations of like, okay, pros about staying, cons about staying, pros about ending the relationship, cons about ending the relationship. We simply had to get to it at a very objective way of what makes sense, or does this make sense to continue, or does this make sense to move on, or what do we need? What are we missing here? So it's a very rational, very research-oriented approach to what were we going to do about our relationship. So the cool thing is that it was a conscious choice. As we were going through that, it was no longer like all of the things circulating in your mind about what's happening and how this other person is and all of that. Now, here's the thing. The gift of this episode for you is that I'm going to tell you about some really important tools that matter to us that I feel like you can definitely take advantage of in your own relationships. So, at the beginning of 2021, I came across this magnificent coach whose name is Jim Young. Jim Young, who's also known as the Centered Coach, that's the name of his practice, was putting out some videos on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and he called it Minutes of Intimacy. And because he and I are in the same coaching network, he just came across my feed. And the first thing that I saw was, Minutes of Intimacy, which is for men, because he was directly talking to men. I thought, this is kind of cool. I haven't heard anybody talking about this, especially not to men. So I tuned in. And over the course of that first week in January 2021, he had this series of minute-long episodes about different types of relationship intimacy. And so he breaks it down like this. There are 5 different types of intimacy. There is experiential intimacy, which is about having new experiences with a person, right? Traveling or trying new things. There is emotional intimacy, which is about being vulnerable with that person, developing a relationship that is based on a deeper level of understanding. There is intellectual intimacy, which means that you stimulate each other and you talk about the big stuff, and critical thinking and all of that can go into the intellectual intimacy. There is physical intimacy, right? Pretty self-explanatory. And there is spiritual intimacy, which is really about not just faith, but how you see the world and how you see yourself in the world. And it was so important what he said, which was, if you think about your relationship, especially one that is failing, one that is struggling, and you think about how you nurtured that relationship to begin with, it is likely that you are struggling because you haven't cultivated those parts of your relationship that brought you together, or because there's other parts of intimacy that you never built, that you never developed, you never cultivated. And friends, you know what was the shocker here? If I had to choose one type of intimacy that I thought we had, it was emotional intimacy. It was the one that was always absent. And that was cause for great concern. We built our relationship on experiential intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and physical intimacy. We dated long distance for several years. And every time we saw each other, he was in Denver, I was in Texas, we would go to a new restaurant, we would try a new experience, we would go to a new place and hike. There was always newness that was being integrated as part of our relationship. Intellectual intimacy, we just are two people who are very critical thinkers, and we talk about things that we know about and things that we don't know about, and we just get into it. And I feel like it's like a massage, it's like a nice, sexy massage to my brain. And the physical or sexual intimacy was just as important, because that's just what we did. We got to know each other in a very intimate, sexually intimate way. So spirituality was not, at least back then, important to me, and especially because I thought about it in terms of faith. And neither of us is religious. And neither of us really talked about like existential stuff back then. Now I talk about it a lot more, but that's a whole other story. The shocker was that for me, somebody who has had such severe adverse childhood experiences, so much trauma in her life, everything from, physical assault, sexual assault, abuse of so many different kinds. How is it possible that I married someone whom I had not developed emotional intimacy with? I mean, honestly, there was a sense in me of like, what? How did I overlook that? How did I not notice? And because during that period of mental health crisis, there was a lot of vulnerability. There were a lot of things that I was struggling through and overcoming and processing and healing. It makes sense as to why he didn't understand any of that. It's because we never had those conversations before. So my tool for you for today is this book, which is Expansive Intimacy by Jim Young. There's an audiobook. He coaches. I highly, highly suggest for anybody who is in a relationship or wants to be in a relationship or is struggling in a relationship, anything to do with a relationship, pick up this book. No matter what your gender, no matter what your sexuality, this book matters. As shocked as I was that we had not developed emotional intimacy, I was so excited that we had an answer, that I had an answer to like, oh, this is what's been missing. Now it all makes sense. Oh, crap. I can choose to stay in the, oh my gosh, how did I not see this? Or I can choose to go, we never developed this. What do we need to do to develop that? Because that is really important to me, and it's important to our relationship, and it's important to what I want to teach my kids. On and on and on and on. So I came to Erik at the end of that week, very, very excited, saying, I got the answers. And engaging him in that conversation. And it made sense to him as well. And we thought, okay, well, what do we do now? What is it that we need to cultivate in our relationship? What is it that we need to nurture in our relationship that we have neglected? Number one. And number two, what are the things that we need to learn to develop emotional intimacy, because that really matters to us. Erik was learning about some of his own childhood traumas that he never even understood before. So it was important for us both to be able to develop a much deeper understanding of each other that we just never had the opportunity to do. So my second gift or recommendation to you today is these cards. I don't know if they're still in circulation, but they're called Rekindle. These cards says 60 great questions to reignite your marriage. It's really to reignite marriage. It's to get to know your partner more deeply. It's to get to know your partner again. We make this mistake of thinking that people are unchanging, that the person that you married, the person that you dated is going to be the same person 20 years from now. And that is not true at all. At all. We evolve in ways that we might not be consciously aware of, but we evolve, we change. Sometimes we devolve. That is still change. So this brings in opportunity and a tool to get out of your head, get in relationship with the person, and learn things about them. So here's the cool part, is that there are 3 different types of cards, okay? You have yellow, you have orange, you have red. As you can imagine, the card's color is dependent on how deep the question is. What matters here is that you let go of the idea that you know the person and that you know what their answer is, and just stay curious. Stay curious about how they will answer the question. Be present with what they say. Don't dismiss what they say. Even a question that you might have heard an answer to before could have changed. It likely has changed. We rework past experiences, traumas, memories through different lenses as we age, as we grow, as we mature, as we learn more, as we are in relationship with other people. So it's a way of re-engaging the person in emotional intimacy, getting to see them. Intimacy. One of the things that I've learned that I feel like it really lands for me is another way of seeing intimacy is into me see. See into me. Intimacy is about seeing the other person. And it is important in every relationship, but is especially important in relationship with the person who you're sharing your life with, who you've created an alliance with, no matter how unconsciously you created that alliance with. It's an opportunity to grow together. It's an opportunity to consciously co-create the relationship, the marriage, the life that you want together, whether that is monogamous or polyamorous. It doesn't matter. So I hope that you took something important away today. I am very curious for you to pick up these resources. I will link them in the show notes for you to be able to pick them up easily. I do not get any commission from this, but I will have to figure out how to do that because I'm constantly telling people about these resources. And in the meantime, I would love to get your questions. I would love to get your questions about how did you deal with X, Y, or Z thing? What are the things that came up? Or what are the things that are happening in your relationship that you're challenged by, that you want a little help with? That's part of what I do in my coaching practice, is to help people through, again, designing consciously the lives that they want. And that includes the relationships that you want. So leave me a comment, send me a message on social media, and I will see you in the next episode.